The worst thing about ruining your own life is knowing you'd probably do it all over again, just for one more hour of feeling alive. My name is Chloe. I'm 32 years old, and my marriage ended not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a laptop closing. For 6 years, I was married to Mark. On paper, he was perfect. A brilliant financial analyst, handsome in a clean-cut, predictable way, and completely devoted to building our future. He loved me the way he loved our investment portfolio, with careful planning, consistent contributions, and a strategy designed to minimize all possible risk. We lived in a sprawling penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline, all glass and steel and minimalist white furniture. Every morning, I'd watch the sunrise paint the city in hues of fire and gold, and I'd feel absolutely nothing. It was a beautiful cage, a very expensive, well-managed cage. Mark's world ran on spreadsheets. Vacations were planned around accumulating airline miles. Dinners out were cross-referenced with restaurant reviews and budget allocations. Our sex life, it was scheduled. Every Thursday night and every other Sunday morning. It wasn't an act of passion. It was an item on a shared calendar. A marital obligation to be checked off before moving on to a discussion about refinancing the mortgage. "We're a team, Chloe," he'd say, his voice calm and reasonable, the same tone he used with his clients. "Every decision we make impacts our long-term goals." I used to find his stability attractive. A rock in the chaos of my 20s. But a rock doesn't keep you warm at night. It just sits there, solid and unchanging, while you slowly freeze around it. I was dying of boredom, starving for a single, spontaneous, reckless moment. And then I met Leo. He wasn't from our world of corporate towers and stock tickers. He was a freelance artist who paid his bills working as a barista at a small independent coffee shop near my office. The place smelled of dark roast and charcoal sketches. Leo had eyes that didn't just look at you, they saw you. He had a constellation of tattoos spiraling up one arm, and a smile that felt like a secret you were lucky to be let in on. It started innocently, a few extra minutes of conversation while he made my latte. He'd ask about my day, and instead of nodding along while checking his phone like Mark did, he'd lean against the counter and actually listen. He didn't care about my contribution to our retirement fund. He asked me what I dreamed about when I was a girl. That question floored me. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked me that. I couldn't remember the last time I had asked myself that. Soon, our coffee chats turned into long lunches. I'd tell him about my suffocatingly perfect life, and he'd tell me about his beautifully chaotic one. He spoke of passion, of creating something from nothing, of sleeping on a friend's couch to save enough money for a new set of oil paints. He was everything Mark wasn't. Unpredictable, vulnerable, and thrillingly alive. He told me about his car, a beat-up relic that was more rust than metal. It kept breaking down, making him late for the odd jobs that barely kept him afloat. "One day," he said, staring into his cup, "I'll just get on a bus and go somewhere new, somewhere warm." Something inside me clicked. A thought, sharp and dangerous, took root. Mark spent tens of thousands of dollars on stocks, on abstract numbers, on a screen that represented some distant, secure future. What was the point of all that security if the present was a barren wasteland? Here was someone I could actually help. Someone whose life I could tangibly change. I wasn't just a name on a joint account, I could be a hero. "We have plenty of money," I told myself, the words a liberating mantra. Money that's just sitting there, accumulating compound interest for a future I don't even want anymore. So I did it. I went to our joint savings account, the one Mark called our emergency fund, and I transferred $5,000. The next day, I took Leo to a used car dealership. We found a decent sedan, nothing fancy, but reliable. The look on his face when I handed him the keys, it was pure, unadulterated gratitude. His eyes shone with tears as he hugged me, lifting me off the ground. "Chloe," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "No one has ever done anything like this for me. You saved me." In that moment, holding the paperwork for a car that wasn't mine, for a man who wasn't my husband, I had never felt more powerful. I had invested in something real. I had invested in a feeling, and it felt like coming up for air after drowning for years. The discovery came 3 days later. It was a Tuesday evening. I was making a salad, and Mark was in the living room, his laptop glowing in the dim light. The only sound was the rhythmic tap of his fingers on the keyboard. Then, the tapping stopped. "Chloe," he said. His voice was perfectly level, devoid of any emotion. It was the same voice he used to say, "The market is down 2 points." He didn't look up from the screen. "What is this $5,000 charge at Vintage Auto Sales?" My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice came out smooth, practiced. I had rehearsed this. "Oh, that," I said, chopping a cucumber with deliberate calm. "That was for Jessica. Her car completely died on the highway, and she needed a down payment for a new one immediately. Her credit is a mess right now. She's paying me back next week, as soon as her paycheck clears." It was a perfect lie. Jessica, my best friend, was a whirlwind of beautiful financial disasters. It was entirely plausible. I waited for the follow-up questions. For the lecture on consulting him first, for the anger. Instead, there was only silence. A heavy, unnerving silence that stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren on the street below. Finally, he spoke. "All right. That was it. Just, all right." He closed the laptop with a soft click, stood up, and walked into his home office, shutting the door behind him. I stood in the kitchen, knife in hand, my mind reeling. This was worse than yelling. The lack of a reaction was a reaction in itself, a vacuum where a fight should have been. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. That night, he slept in the guest room. "I have an early call with the Hong Kong office," he said, pulling a pillow and a blanket from the linen closet without making eye contact. "Don't want to wake you." He never moved back into our bedroom. Our home, once a silent tomb of routine, became a cold war zone. We were two polite ghosts sharing a space. He'd leave for work before I woke up. He'd communicate via text messages about household matters. "The plumber is coming at 10 on Friday. We're out of milk." I tried to provoke him. I wore the lingerie he'd bought for my birthday. I suggested a weekend trip. He'd just nod and say, "That sounds nice, but I'm swamped with work right now." His face was a placid mask, his eyes revealing nothing. The silence was his weapon. It was maddening. It was a constant, low-humming accusation that I couldn't defend myself against because it was never spoken aloud. My guilt, which should have been assuaged by a fiery argument and a tearful reconciliation, was left to fester in the quiet. And it pushed me. It pushed me right back into Leo's arms. With Mark treating me like a roommate he was legally obligated to tolerate, Leo's world became my refuge. He was my escape from the chilling silence at home. "He's just punishing you," Leo would say, tracing patterns on my hand as we sat in dimly lit bars. "It's a power play. He wants you to feel small." Leo made me feel anything but small. With him, I was magnificent. I was a patron of the arts, a generous soul, a savior. My generosity started to flow more freely. The joint credit card became my tool of rebellion. An expensive dinner at a steakhouse Mark would have called fiscally irresponsible. That was me cheering up Jessica after a bad breakup. A weekend trip to a cozy cabin upstate, that was a wellness retreat I desperately needed. Each purchase was a small act of defiance, a message I was sending to a husband who refused to listen. Leo's financial troubles seemed to multiply. His landlord was threatening eviction. A gallery owner who'd promised him a show had pulled out, taking his deposit with him. Each new crisis was an opportunity for me to step in, to feel needed, to feel the intoxicating rush of being his everything. Meanwhile, Mark's silent surveillance grew more sophisticated. He never confronted me directly, but he'd drop little grenades of information into our sterile conversations. "I saw Jessica posted photos from a yoga class this weekend," he commented one evening, scrolling through his phone. "I thought you two were at that cabin in the mountains." I froze. "Oh, that was last weekend's post. You know how she is with social media?" Another time, after I'd spent nearly $2,000 on a shopping spree for Leo, new clothes for job interviews, Mark met me at the door. "I got a fraud alert from the credit card company," he said, his expression unreadable. "Some unusual activity. I told them to cancel the card, just to be safe. They're sending a new one." He paused, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in weeks. "You need to be more careful, Chloe." It wasn't a warning. It was a move on a chessboard. He knew. Of course, he knew. He was a financial analyst. He could probably track a missing dollar bill across 3 continents. He wasn't trying to stop me. He was watching, documenting, letting me dig my own grave, shovel by shovel, and my anger at his cold, calculating game burned away any remaining guilt. This wasn't about love or betrayal anymore. It was about winning. The first public execution happened on a sunny Thursday afternoon. I was at Leo's apartment, a small, cluttered space that felt more like home than my own when his phone rang. He listened for a moment, his face paling. "What do you mean? You're outside?" he hissed into the phone. "What repossession?" We rushed to the window. Down on the street, a tow truck was hooking up its winch to the sedan. His sedan. Our sedan. "No!" I screamed, grabbing my keys and flying down the stairs, Leo close behind. When we burst onto the sidewalk, I saw him. Mark. He was standing across the street, leaning against a brick wall, hands tucked into the pockets of his tailored slacks. He looked like he was waiting for a bus, completely calm, completely detached from the chaotic scene unfolding. The tow truck driver ignored my frantic protests, handing me a clipboard with a stack of papers. "Ma'am, I've got a legal order here. The vehicle is being reclaimed by the primary title holder." "That's me!" I shrieked, my voice cracking. "I paid for it!" That's when Mark crossed the street. He didn't even glance at me. His focus was entirely on Leo. "The loan was co-signed under my name for a better insurance rate," Mark stated, his voice as flat as the pavement. "The vehicle was purchased with funds from a marital account, making it marital property. As the legal owner, I am reclaiming my asset." He spoke as if he were explaining a minor market fluctuation. Leo looked between me and Mark, his usual charm replaced by pure panic. "Chloe, what the hell is this? You told me this was a gift. You said he didn't know." "It is a gift." I turned on Mark, my fists clenched. "You can't do this. This is cruel. You're doing this just to spite me." Mark finally turned his gaze to me. His eyes were like chips of ice. "Your boyfriend can figure out his own transportation," he said softly. Yet each word was a razor blade. "I am done subsidizing your affair." He turned and walked away, not looking back as the truck pulled away with the car, taking Leo's lifeline and my grand gesture of rebellion with it. Back in his apartment, the spell was broken. Leo wasn't looking at me with adoration anymore. He was looking at me with accusation. "My whole life was in that car, Chloe. How could you let this happen? You promised me you had it under control." I tried to calm him, promising I'd fix it, that I'd get him another one. But for the first time, I saw a flicker of something hard and calculating in his eyes. I wasn't his savior anymore. I was a liability. That night, when I walked into the cold silence of my own home, I knew this was only the beginning. This wasn't just punishment. This was war. A week later, the final checkmate was delivered. It wasn't Mark who handed it to me. It was a stranger in a cheap suit, a process server who knocked on the door at 8 in the morning. He handed me a thick manila envelope. "Chloe Williams?" he asked. I nodded numbly. "You've been served." As he walked away, I saw Mark's car pull away from the curb down the street. He had been waiting, watching, making sure the package was delivered. I sat on our cold marble floor and tore the envelope open. It wasn't just divorce papers. It was a meticulously compiled dossier of my betrayal, my execution order. His lawyer, one of the top divorce attorneys in Chicago, had left no stone unturned. There were itemized credit card statements, highlighting every expensive dinner, every hotel room, every piece of clothing I'd bought for Leo. There was a copy of the bank transfer for the $5,000 for the car. There was a signed, notarized affidavit from Jessica, stating that she had never borrowed any money from me for a car, and had, in fact, he'd been on a yoga retreat in Arizona on the weekend I claimed we were at a cabin together. He had gone to my best friend. He had methodically dismantled my web of lies, thread by thread. But the final exhibit was the one that made me physically ill. It was a transcript of a phone call, a call between me and Jessica from weeks ago, where I had been laughing, bragging about how I was handling Mark. "He's so clueless," my own voice mocked me from the page. "He just sits there with his spreadsheets while I'm actually out there living. It's almost too easy." He had been recording me. In our own home. The legal terms were brutal. Dissipation of marital assets, financial infidelity. They made me sound like a common criminal. The settlement offer was simple. I would walk away with nothing. No alimony, no share of the penthouse or his savings. I would be responsible for half of the $30,000 of credit card debt I had single-handedly racked up. If I chose to fight it, they would submit all of this evidence in open court and sue me for the full amount I had spent on my affair. I was trapped. He hadn't just been silent. He had been building my cage, bar by bar, using my own actions as the raw material. He had given me enough rope not to hang myself, but to braid a noose so perfectly designed that my own struggles only tightened it. The quiet, predictable man I had dismissed as boring had become my judge, jury, and executioner. And he had done it all without ever raising his voice. The end came swiftly after that. I signed the papers. What choice did I have? Leo vanished. The moment he realized the river of money had dried up, he became distant, his calls less frequent, until they stopped altogether. One night, fueled by cheap wine and self-pity, I Googled his name, or the name I knew him by. The search results hit me like a physical blow. There he was, in a mugshot from 2 years prior in Wisconsin. His real name was Daniel. He was part of a fraud ring that targeted emotionally vulnerable women, milking them for money before disappearing. The artist, the dreamer, the struggling soul, it was all a script. A well-rehearsed performance, and I had given him a standing ovation paid for with my entire life. I had destroyed my marriage not for love, but for a con man. The thought was so grotesque it was almost laughable. I had to move out of the penthouse within 30 days. Packing up my life, surrounded by the ghosts of a future I had thrown away, was a special kind of hell. Every object whispered of my failure. In a moment of pure, undiluted desperation, I called Mark. The divorce was final, but he was still the only person who had ever really known me. I thought somewhere deep down there must be a shred of the man who once promised to protect me. He answered on the fourth ring. "What do you want, Chloe?" His voice was tired. The story spilled out of me in a torrent of sobs. About Leo, about the fraud, about the mugshot, about how I had been a fool, how I had lost everything for a lie. I begged him, not for forgiveness, but for a sliver of understanding, for a single word of comfort. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. For a crazy second, I thought I heard pity in that silence. Then he spoke, and his words were the final, killing blow. They were cold, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. "You told me you were investing in a feeling, Chloe," he said. "Consider these your returns." He hung up. That was 6 months ago. Now I live in a cramped studio apartment on the other side of the city, the kind with thin walls and a view of a brick alleyway. The debt collectors call daily. My friends, tired of my endless drama, have slowly drifted away. Even Jessica keeps her distance, the ghost of my betrayal hanging between us. Sometimes, late at night, I drive past our old building. I look up at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, a rectangle of light hanging in the dark sky. I wonder if he's in there, poring over a new spreadsheet, happy in his quiet, orderly world. I wonder if he ever thinks of me. He probably doesn't. For him, I was a bad investment. A miscalculation that has since been corrected, the losses cut, the portfolio rebalanced. I wanted to feel alive, and for a few reckless months, I did. But this is the price, this crushing, unending loneliness. The silence Mark left me with is different from the one he punished me with. That silence was a presence, a weight. This silence, it's an absence. It's the sound of my own life, hollowed out and empty, echoing with the choices I made. And it's a sound I know I'll be listening to for the rest of my days.